All right, good evening, and I'm so excited to bring to you our second week of A Story to Tell, Lent Outside the Box. Tonight, I'm really excited to introduce to you in a new way our People Living with Disabilities inclusion team. They've met a few times, have some amazing ideas and plans and stories to share, and that conversation is being facilitated by Steve Berry tonight. So we're just going to spend some time listening and sharing and talking about disabilities and why it's so important to share our stories around disability, inclusion, and awareness. So thank you all for your time tonight, for your willingness to share, for your passion and love for this congregation and the community. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the Holy Spirit does in our conversation tonight. I'm going to disappear now.
Hi, let me just start off with a question. And when you start talking the first time, maybe you could introduce yourself. When you think about this past year in the pandemic, what stories come to mind?
So I'm Jeannine Eddy, and what comes to mind for me is how isolation and with the social distancing that has happened because of the pandemic, how much it has increased mental health challenges, people that either had mental health challenges or living with that disability, that kind of the unseen disability, how much it's increased that that problem or exacerbated, existing ones or created them. And it is, and how much more difficult it has been for people that have either been connected to treatments, therapies, seeing doctors, how much more difficult it's been for them to be able to stay connected with the treatments that can help them. So that's one thing that I think about as a change or a challenge during this pandemic.
For me, hi, I'm Enna W. I had polio since I was a baby. So I have had issues with trying to exercise, and with the pandemic closing all the pools, pretty much had to be creative on how I can, exercise without the pool. So um, one of the things that has changed is now I walk with my dog who also has hip issues. So I had to be really creative instead of walking, 3 or 4 blocks, which I cannot do, which in the pool, I am able to exercise for about an hour without any problem. But now I have to be creative and take more shorter walks with my dog who also has hip issues. So I think being creative during the pandemic, when you have a disability, is definitely something that we have to do, because there's limitations that this pandemic is bringing to us. That's pretty much all I could say. Thank you.
So another thing that I'll kind of a personal story for me is when this pandemic started, my loved one who lives with a mental disability was living in a group home. And at the beginning of the pandemic, there was all this awareness about how much more at risk people were living in group homes, board and cares, etc. And so it became aware to us, or evident to us, that we needed to think about bringing our loved one home under our roof so that we could be sure that he was social distancing and away from the exposure of more people, because when you have a lot of people under one roof, you've got more exposure from people that are coming and going, things that you really can't control. So we made the decision to bring him home, and that has worked out. However, I'll also note that had this pandemic started 3 years ago, that would not have been possible for us. He was not in a place, he was not stable enough for us to be able to bring him home. And so, I feel very blessed that that worked out for us. But I also think about all of the families that have loved ones who are not in a position to be able to bring have their families live at home with them, and they're not able to be connected with them or see them, or, you know, that have died in group homes or nursing homes or care facilities, and just how much more difficult that has been for everyone. And so an additional challenge to all of this, connections with people are super important. And, you know, and whether you make them, you know, because you go visit them or whatever, it's super important to know that they're cared for and they're not forgotten. And this pandemic has just heightened that, you know, the fact that they can't, you know, they can't be near them, or, you know, because of the fear of spreading or getting COVID.
Mhm.
See what's going on.
I think one of the problems we had in our household was we have 5 people living in our house, and 4 of us have disabilities of some kind. And it's not being able to get out and go to the grocery whenever you want. And Heather, she's 48, she goes to a day program, and that's closed because of the academic or because of the virus. And she doesn't really understand why she can't go. Doesn't understand why she can't go out and eat. And it's been tough on her, not getting depressed, and that makes it tough on us too. And myself, I had polio when I was 65 years ago, and I have lung disease now, and it made it more important for me, especially with the lung disease and my age, that if I caught the virus, I probably wouldn't last very long, just simply because of lung problems. And it's one thing that bothered me the whole time of the virus last year is how many disabled people and people disabled because of age-related problems have died. The main percentage of people passed away is elderly and disabled, and that's one thing that bothered me throughout the most, besides our personal issues.
What about you, Ryan? Do you have any examples? Now, you
There we
obviously
go.
you yourself live with a disability, but you also work with people who live with disabilities. And how has that been going for you this last year?
Yes, I'm Ryan Frisella. In the way I live with cerebral palsy, as born with it, and just this last, actually almost 2 years ago now, in August, I started a job at Access to Independence, and I help youth with disabilities. I'm the youth service coordinator, and it's was so much fun, and it still is, but it's really shifted now because the job is so interactive and person to person, and helping them make their own goals for, like, driving or for social recreation or for job vocational stuff, any type of goal that they want to work on. And now it's kind of different because, like, with the people who are doing the driving, we have a simulator where they can practice and go on and have this, like, behind the wheel um, practice, and we can't do that right now. And all the recreational stuff has to be over Zoom. And I was planning some fun activities before, like a Halloween party. I'm not doing that right now except over Zoom. And um, actually, a lot of the job also now has been trying to get together packages for groceries and PPE supplies. I never thought that would be part of my job, but that's what's happened with the pandemic, and it's been a real challenge. Like I'm so used to being a social person, and I use the MTS trolley and bus everywhere that I go, and I can get to almost everywhere as long as it's on the trolley line. And I'm not doing any of that right now. And I think the social distancing is lot a lot worse for me than wearing a mask. I don't think I have a problem at all with wearing masks, but I'm missing the what everybody else is saying, the connection. And I'm so glad I have many friends who check in on me every once in a while, and actually a lot. Um, but yeah, it's just a challenge. I'm losing a little bit of my, I mean, not losing, but I'm not practicing a lot of my mobility because I used to go to the gym a lot to exercise, and I'm exercising some, but I usually go on the treadmill at the gym, and I'm not like doing that right now. I have a friend who's a physical therapist, and we were going to talk about exercise suggestions at some point in the future. But yeah, it's been a real challenge, but I'm gotten into a routine now, and I'm really glad to be living at home and have a job, because I don't know what I would be doing right now with all this free time if I didn't have a job. So that was a lot, but yeah, that's what I'm feeling.
You're muted, Steve.
If you think about it, where have you found moments of hope or promise in the midst of any of the challenges you do have?
I think with this pandemic, I found I find that the neighbors are a lot friendlier. They're actually, saying hi. People, you see a lot of people walking. There's actually on in our path, my dog Buck and I walked this path, and one of the neighbors have this rock garden, and they actually encourage the neighbors to paint some rocks and add to the rock garden. And it started out with just maybe 3 rocks, painted rocks, and the theme is, what are you thankful for? And now this whole sidewalk in front of their house is filled with rocks from different people. So I think a lot of people are really being creative in, sharing hope and maybe sharing some, love, even with strangers. So maybe that's what the pandemic, you know, is giving us.
I think also for me, it's, when you're challenged with things, I think, where there's a will, there's a way to kind of work through it if you really want to get something done. And, a year ago, I couldn't have told you what Zoom was, or, I learned Zoom. I'm not a real technical person. And so, I help with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I teach family to family classes and support groups for families, because just because there's a pandemic doesn't mean that the need goes away. People are still struggling to find ways to help their loved ones, as far as mental illness, get treatment and all of that. And I was resistant to wanting to do something technical or through Zoom, but I did. I pushed through it, and it's just people in classes have been so understanding of the challenges that we have in trying to teach through Zoom, and that's just been great. So I didn't have to be perfect. We've learned as we've gone along, and super grateful, and yet they're able to get information that's helpful. And so there's a way, even still through this challenge, for things to be good for people or to help them. And that feeds me to be able to continue doing what was so helpful for me years ago when we had the challenge that we had. And I will never forget that. I will never forget, that feeling of being lost and not knowing where to turn or where to get help. And I will never forget that. And so that importance of being able to get that information out to people, however you can do it, is really, that's really powerful. And, you find a way, you will find a way.
I think the pandemic has slowed life down and given people time to think about how fragile life is, and that your life can change in a moment's notice, and you never know when or what it'll be. And it's I think it's giving people time to think about it, and especially gives them time to get along with people they're with, or at least talk about stuff. It's kind of tough being stuck at home for a year or more, but it's manageable, and we found our ways of getting around and getting all of our stuff, and it's I'm a lot more hopeful about the future now than I was when it's all started, I think.
Yeah, I would say that I'm the same. I'm a lot more hopeful, I think, now, especially that a vaccine's here and all, and that. But I'd say something that gave me hope is I didn't really know what Zoom was until I had classes at Grossmont in sign language, and some of our classes were we had to do a lot of projects over Zoom. So I actually had a lot of practice with this platform before all this happened. Otherwise, I'd be in the dark, just like a lot of other people. And I'm really glad because other than getting inside the room, it's all really pretty easy. And I'd also say that the hope is that um, life has slowed down, but people are still getting things done, and good things are still happening. Like my sister's getting married at the end of the year, and my friends got engaged, a couple of my friends, and there's good things to be hopeful for. And that, like I said, I reach out to my friends, and I get I'm comfortable talking to them whenever. And someone said about the neighbors, like that's true. I found also that you get really close with your neighbors. We kind of have a weekly chat that we like to do, and that's pretty fun. And yeah, I think just that we have ways to talk to each other now without being in person. I think it would be a lot different if this pandemic happens earlier, and I'm glad for that.
A lot of hope was just shared there. I was just wondering about, has your relationship with St. Andrews changed, and what do you look forward to?
I miss church. That's all I can say. I miss going to church and seeing everybody.
We
I
miss
think
you all
as
too, if you don't even know. Go ahead, sorry.
I've gotten to know a lot more people, you know, by talking to them face to face, and that's been enjoyable. We have a lot of hardworking, intelligent people here in our church. Starting with the pastors, but I think that's the most part. I've really got to know more people on an individual basis here, as far as talking about stuff and our Bible meetings and things. I've learned a lot about the individuals in our church. You know, for 30 or so that they do this, and that's been enjoyable.
I agree. I'm looking forward to getting together in person for church. I do miss that, but I agree with Roy. I've, participated or had more opportunity, I guess, to participate in some of the adult forums, and I know the adult Sunday school's been going on for a while, but I've been able to do that, and it's, I don't know if it's easier just to be able to go to your family room and turn your computer on rather than having to actually drive and be somewhere. In some ways, that's an easier thing. But yes, I've gotten to know people more, the knowing is a deeper connection when, talking about, some of the issues and subjects that we are discussing in the adult forum, and, and all of that. So that's a blessing, certainly in the challenge of the pandemic.
I've really missed going to church in person and seeing everybody, like especially the last couple of years before the pandemic. Like, I've gotten into a routine of going almost every week, and now I'm glad that I am on the board and I can talk to church over Zoom, but I sometimes forget about the services on Sunday, and so it's like harder to keep track of things sometimes, because it's like, oh, it's 10 o'clock and I'm not there, and that's okay. But yeah, I'm trying to stay connected. I think I'm doing a good job with the board and trying to stay up on everything, but I'm glad to be here now and on the board, and Facebook has helped to keep in touch with everybody in that group too. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to going back in person.
How does your faith in God guide you in your work or in your day to day?
I want to say one other thing about the last question. The way the church has and the pastors have gotten us onto electronic services for Facebook, the YouTube services, the music we're listening to with the words and stuff that come up. They're really enjoyable. That it's I think that's going to make us a better church for lots of people, because when people have problems getting to church on Sunday, they can get an iPad or a phone and watch the service live, or or anytime during the week, and get the news about what's going on. And I think that's fantastic. And I think it's going to be a major improvement when we get back to going to church on Sunday morning.
Yeah, one of our hopes is that it will actually make worship and church community more accessible to people who would have challenges being with us in person for one reason or another. And I feel like we've learned so much about that and stuff we just weren't really aware of or paying attention to. Now it's like lessons that we've learned to make about the importance of accessibility and recognizing that community is such a bigger thing than we ever imagined, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so excited about the work this team is doing, because it was a conversation that started before the pandemic about how do we make sure we are an accessible place for people living with disabilities, seen or unseen, visible or invisible, or disabilities that they're aging into, all these things that are very common experiences, but often aren't, like we talked about in other meetings, there's a stigma attached to it, or we aren't paying attention, or it's the community as a whole is often invisible in society for one reason or another. And so the awareness that I think this pandemic has brought to light is so important. And I see God working in that.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think also with this conversation being started, you only see disability. I think most people's idea of disability is just the physical disability, but there's other disabilities out there, and there's different faces to it. It's old, young, different colors of skin. And I think for the most part, most people are very uncomfortable asking questions about disability. But as in my experience, as I get older, I'm a lot more open to sharing my experience as a disabled person, and not really be limited by it. I'm okay when somebody asks you, so why are you limping? And then I ask them, and then I go through, the vaccine really helps, because if you didn't have vaccine, that's what happened to me. So, the knowledge, I think, of somebody who's been disabled for most of their life, if you can even just reach one person to be comfortable asking the question, and also a disabled person being comfortable with the disability, then at least you help that person.
You talked about, the stigma around disability, particularly, seen and unseen disabilities, and, relating to mental illnesses. The stigma, I think the definition of it is, it's a mark of disgrace that is given to, about a circumstance or a person. And it often, there's a lot of shame around that people feel around that. Either the person that lives with the disability or the mental disability or illness, and then also their families. It used to be believed that, it's poor parenting, or, weak character, or all these other, just lack of information about what, mental illnesses are. They are brain disorders. It's, the circuitry in the brain just is not working right. And it's expressed in often some odd behaviors with people. And so being able to talk about it, or have people, feel comfortable about understanding that, and not, and working through that shame that might be associated with all, or that you might have caused somehow, done something, whether intentionally or unintentionally, to cause that. I mean, those are heavy things to work through. And so finding people that understand that's probably the biggest thing. And it is such a commonplace, mental illness is such a commonplace. 1 in 5 people live with a mental illness. So that means 1 in 5 people have family members or loved ones that are affected by someone that have a mental illness. So it's affecting a lot of people, whether you live with it or you are, you're a family member or a loved one. And you would not be shamed if you had cancer. You would not be shamed if you had diabetes. You would not be shamed if you had a heart condition. It shouldn't be that way with someone that has mental illness or that's struggling with a substance use disorder. And so it needs to be, it's helpful to have people be comfortable, at least about asking and talking about it. This is what I'm going through. These are the feelings. It creates all kinds of different emotions. It brings up all kinds of different emotions when you have that challenge, whether you're living with that, with that mental illness, it may prevent you from wanting to seek or get help for it, because there can be help. Or if you're a family member, just, working through all the emotions that it brings up. It's trauma. It can be trauma for both family members and the loved ones that live with it. And I'm sure there's, often, physical disabilities too, people that are born with physical disabilities or any other severe illness or whatever. There's emotions and challenges that come with that as well.
Well, shame is one of the first things a person with disability has to get out of their mind before you can get back into society. I think you really can't function fully if you're ashamed of yourself for being disabled, which you really can't help. And having family members too can assist in overcoming that, help to make sure you get out into society and do things. Like that little girl with spina bifida that used to come to our church. I mean, she was confident about doing anything she wanted. I really enjoyed watching her go out and deal with, her friends and adults and everything. She did such a great job, and her parents did a great job too.
I think
I
that's
just
why oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I've done a lot of presentations about my disability in groups and schools and in classes, elementary classes. I have no problem at all answering genuine questions or talking about my disability. I think the majority of people really like hearing these stories, and I found that if I have a positive outlook about it, then they will too. And I have a lot of people who are friends who don't have a disability, and they really like what I have to say, and I don't have a problem talking to about my experience with anybody if they have a genuine question. So just don't be afraid to ask anybody who like wants to learn sign language or whatever, to talk to a deaf customer at their work or whatever. Just it's okay to ask and talk, and you got to bridge the gap somewhere. So
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important that we make it really, really clear that we believe that that God's image resides in every person. And it's not in spite of the fact that someone may have some kind of a disability. That in fact, God's presence, God's image is reflected within the wholeness of a human experience, not just the parts of ourselves that we think we have together, right? But in the wholeness of a person, and to recognize that we see the beauty and diversity of God's creation in all people. And so someone living with a disability, God is not punishing you. There's nothing that you did or didn't do which I think was a very harmful way of thinking about it for a very long time. And that we recognize the giftedness that God provides for every person, and that it's not like God made some mistake, and that you have to just suffer the consequences. And I think I'm appreciative that conversations have shifted that way, you know?
I know myself, I've lived a wonderful life. That I figured if I hadn't had polio, I would have grew up being a farmer on a tobacco farm, you know. But you know, I've got to travel all over the country and met so many nice people and done so many fun things, and have a great family here in San Diego, which is my home now. So it's God has blessed me in innumerable ways all my life.
I agree. I think Jeannine's son or kids are very, very lucky because, you know, my parents, just like Jeannine, did not give me any limitation. I grew up, you know, like I did not have a disability. I was, you know, when I used to be able to run, I remember running with friends, limping and running at the same time. But my parents never really gave me any limitation. So I grew up, you know, back then I was kind of like very self-conscious about my limping and my polio, but it didn't really stop me from doing the things that I want to be able to do. And as I got older, I think I'm thankful that I was raised that way, that, you know, they didn't limit me. They didn't protect me so much because my leg is not working normal. That I think it made me who I am right now. So yeah, I agree with Roy. Your disability should not define you.
Yeah, it's important to see the person and not the disability or the
Exactly.
illness.
Exactly.
See the person.
Yep. Well, very much well put. Yes.
Steve, you have another question? Then I think we'll try to wrap up here in a few minutes because it's like dinner time.
Yeah.
I'm so appreciative of all your time, but
And
I could talk about it all night.
I can hardly think that the last question is going to clear up anything, because it's those answers the answers you guys gave the last few were just kind of like, that was it. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm blessed that you guys all came.
Thank you. I think things are changing. I just for the better, and the little bits of progress that are made to feel comfortable talking about things and raise awareness and educate and all of that changes it. You know, it's like that trickle in the water. You know, the little drop goes in and it just spreads out and it gets bigger. And that's what I feel. And that's you know, I feel like that is, for me, it's purposeful. It helps me understand, you know, maybe in a why, you know, not that we were punished to have this in our life, but there was purpose to it. And to live through the challenge allows you to have that experience and that wisdom to help and share and change things for the better. And that's how I look at it. That is and that's a blessing. It's a blessing.
Well, I think we need to be careful and make sure that the rights we've earned over the last 50 years for both blacks and minorities and whites and blacks and Spanish, that we all have to fight to keep those. Almost every year or two, they go through and try to weaken some of the access laws we have in California and the rest of the country. I read an article this morning about Canada uh, doesn't have the type of support systems we have. It's more institutional based, and people that need a lot of care don't get treated very well. And it was kind of shocking that Canada, which I always thought was progressive, was not as progressive as I thought they were. And it's just something we have to fight, keep our representatives, senators, and politicians know that we require this help, and that disabled people make life better for the whole country. We get more people and more ideas out into circulation. It's better for everyone.
For me, I think what I would like to see is definitely education, sharing the knowledge, exposing, especially the kids. Because I think when you start exposing kids to different people, different opinions, then they'll grow up more accepting and more, accepting that not everybody looks the same, not everybody walks the same, and even if you're walking with a limp, you're okay. If you have a mental disability, you're okay. That it's don't assume, so, and it's okay to ask questions. So I think as we start educating our youth, the younger the better. Hopefully it'll be a better world, I guess.
I know you see advertisements now and TV shows. There's a lot of advertisements have a wheelchair user in the background. You don't see too many people walking with crutches though, but TV shows are having disabled characters now, and I'm not sure how many of them are actually disabled, but just the fact of being an independent, active person in a wheelchair. And I know there's a lot of people I know or have known that work on getting into the TV business up in LA. I used to live up there. It was a long time ago. So things I think are improving, and it's stuff like that has to keep improving, especially with the equipment, computers, machines that read to you, and touch chat. There's all kinds of machines that help people communicate nowadays, so they're fairly reasonably priced. And if you have the right disabilities, there's areas or people that can help you get it.
Ryan, do you have any closing thoughts or things you want to make sure you get to share?
I agree. I think education is really important, and just like I said, ask questions. It's all right, and I agree as far as what Roy said, that ableism is a real thing, and we're not done just because the ADA is signed. Things changing all the time, and we need to make sure that we keep on and keep those rights and make things better. And that's kind of one thing that really drew me to my job, I think, is that I grew up with before I had the job, I was trying to figure out how to adapt to challenges, to things like school and finding a job and things like that. And now it's kind of come full circle for me, is that I can use my job to help youth with the same challenges that I grew up trying to figure out. So that's what I'm trying to push on and keep things better, is give it all back and hope that we can all learn from each other and make this divide between people with disabilities and without, and make it better and more understanding. So
I don't know if you guys know, but Ryan works for the Independent Living Center in San Diego. What's it called now? Access to Independence?
yeah, it's called Access to Independence. It's a center for independent living.
Yes.
And I'm the youth service coordinator. I work with high school freshmen all the way up through college and after college, and I help with transportation goals and school goals and job goals, and even just recreational, let's have a fun activity together type of goal. And it's really changed a lot with the pandemic and everything, but I've really found that I'm still able to help people, help the youth with their goals. Right now I'm helping a lot with groceries and PPE supplies, so important things, but I'm also helping with college searches still, and driving goals still. It just looks a little different, but I'm glad I'm able to help in that way.
I love that you're doing that, Ryan. And then when I was listening to you all talk, especially in that last part, what I heard was, all of us, every human being needs places and relationships in our lives where we are fully accepted and loved for exactly who we are. And, and for people living with disabilities, there are roadblocks oftentimes to those relationships, to those spaces. That's people who don't know what that's like, don't understand, right? And so the fact that I love that Ryan has taken, and all of you in your own ways, but it was fun to listen to Ryan know that that's your job now, right? Is to create an environment where young people who live with a disability figure out how to live the lives they want to live, how to be in healthy relationships so they're loved and accepted for exactly who they are. And I think that's, again, I think that's the goal for all of us in church, right? That church would be a place that's like that for everyone. You don't have to hide the fact that you have a mental illness or you live with a disability and some, a visible or invisible disability. And I just want to thank you all for your passion and commitment to helping us become more that place for each other. It's a beautiful thing. So thanks for sharing your voices and stories. Do you have anything else you want to add, Steve?
I want to thank you.
I can't think of anything.
That's my pleasure. I don't. This is all the best thing. I just love anytime this team gets together. It just I love it. I just love the passion you all have. Were you going to say something, Steve?
One thing also we need to think about are the people with addictions that come to our church every multiple groups of them that which we help find meeting places for, and that's another class of disability that most people rarely think about.
Yeah, thank you.
Very stigmatized, incredibly stigmatized.
Also, one other thing I want to point out, I worked at the Access to Independence. It was known as the Community Service Center for the Disabled. I started working there in about 1979, and the independent living movement has made fantastic changes in in life for people with disabilities. And a lot of the people that started it are in the Crip Camp movie. And you can see them when they're young and struggling. So I enjoyed tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for wrestling through Zoom to get here, Roy.
Yes, it was worth the wait to have
Yeah.
you, all of you.
Steve, do you have anything else you want to say or anything?
I don't. I'm just thrilled to be here and listening to everybody's their stories. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for your time. I'm going to stop recording. Okay.